Hey, friends and comrades. I am back with the next section of Kenji Moto's book, Cuisine of the Dictator. And I've gotten some new equipment and my screen is a lot bigger than it usually is. I also got a keyboard to make music. You can see the reflection of it on my glasses, and I can't quite get things adjusted to where there's not a lot of reflection. So sorry about that. Hopefully, it'll be better in the next video. My husband has translated for me the next section of the book, and so I'm going to be reading it off my screen here. You'll see me reading here, and let's get into it, friends. Also, as I said in the last video, I Kenji Fujimoto to be a really strange, morally ambiguous figure. He seems to have a really odd love for Kim Jong Il, even as he describes really horrifying situations with him. It's very odd. And I also want to note some of the confusion might be due to issues with translation. There's that. With all that being said, let's start on page 45. That's where we left off of Cuisine of the Dictator. There's a few pages skipped in between the last one and 45. That's because they're just picture pages in the book. Okay. Kenji says, the first 2 months in Japan, I rested peacefully and evacuated all the fatigue I had accumulated in North Korea. I'm breaking in here to say, friends, this is whenever he had went back to Japan after his first stint in North Korea. Kenji says, then I started telling myself that I should look for work. It was at that moment that a restaurant offered me a position, a sushi restaurant called Sake in Kwango, in the prefecture of Saitama. Again, apologies if I'm pronouncing these all wrong, friends. I'm sure I am. About 50 kilometers northwest of Tokyo, located right in the heart of the Aishihara district, the sake was doing very well. With loyal and numerous clientele, the days were calm, and on average, we prepared 7 to 8 times the equivalent of 5 kilograms of rice for sushi. But when there were a lot of customers, we could make 11 or 13 preparations of that same amount. In the new year, the place went up to 30. The kindness of the owner and the generosity of his wife, who made delicious kimono lui, I'm not sure what that is, friends, was no less wonderful and earned them an excellent reputation. I was delighted to work there. At the end of December, the owner asked me if I would agree to manage the restaurant. Any chef would have jumped at such an offer after just 4 to 5 months of activity. It was the greatest honor a man in my position could hope for. Despite everything, I declined the offer, claiming it was too early for me. If they entrusted me with managing a restaurant, I would be forced to work with a lot of rigor. I didn't yet feel mature enough to take on such a heavy responsibility and thought I could learn a little more first. When I think about it now, I may have missed out on something. Even today, I sincerely thank those people from the bottom of my heart. To be honest, I was increasingly nostalgic for my life in North Korea. I found myself preparing sushi in front of Kim Jong Il, and that image never left me. When I became aware of how much I missed it, I called the North Korean Chamber of Commerce. I explained that I wanted to return to work there and that I was ready to take a position in Kwango. Someone called back to offer me employment. In June 1985, after 2 years of good and loyal service, I left Sake to join Yotatsu in Tsukui near Yokohama. Every time I changed jobs, I would inform the Chamber of Commerce of my new employer's details. The team at Yotatsu was very kind, the customers were plentiful, and the restaurant doing well. I spent my second New Year since returning to Japan. The season passed, and the hot weeks of summer quickly arrived. One day, a Mercedes Benz pulled into the parking lot, and 3 men entered the restaurant. The moment I caught sight of them, I let out a small cry. It was my interpreter, Jong. Mr. Fujimoto, it's been a long time. Those words brought all the memories flooding back. Indeed, it really has been a long time. Would you consider coming back to our country again? I had been impatiently waiting for that question every single day. I immediately accepted the offer, saying that I wanted to return to North Korea and that the Chamber of Commerce had already been informed. Satisfied with my answer, he added before leaving, could you come to my office at the new Otani Hotel after work? We can talk more calmly there. July 1987, second departure for North Korea. I arrived at the new Otani late in the afternoon. The same 3 men I had never seen before were there again, this time in Jong's office. They introduced themselves as president, director, and administrator, and we immediately began discussing the contract. The director at first asked what salary I expected. I answered frankly, last time it was 500,000 yen. Today, I earn 300,000 yen. So, if possible, I would like a salary double that, meaning 600,000 yen. A little embarrassed, the director told me that the current head chef's salary in Japan was just 400,000 yen. The president stepped in, telling me to keep quiet about my contract amount, saying it shouldn't cause any problems. Thanks to his intervention, they quickly agreed. Next, the president asked how long I wanted to work. I said I was planning to open a small restaurant at the end of my contract, and that, for that reason, I would like it to last 3 years. Surprised that I wanted to stay for such a long time, the two men exchanged glances. However, they promised me on the spot that when I returned to Japan after my project, half of my salary, 300,000 yen, would be paid directly to the family I was leaving behind, and the other half would be deposited into my North Korean account to cover my personal expenses. I also managed to obtain the right to return to Japan twice a year and to have my salary transferred to my Japanese bank account during my leave. I was more than satisfied by the end of the discussion. I was finally going back to North Korea. The idea of preparing sushi in front of Kim Jong il again filled me with joy. I could barely contain it. And so, on a hot August day in 1987, my family came to the Narita airport to see me off on this great departure. My wife and daughters were worried to see me leave for the second time, and for 3 long years at that. I, on the other hand, felt calm. Deep in my heart, I felt no unease at all. On the contrary, I was convinced that by going to North Korea, Kim Jong il would once again call for my services. Even in my wildest dreams, I could never have imagined that my life would change so dramatically from that point on. That is the end of page 41. In the basement of Koryo Hotel. I arrived in Pyongyang in August 1987 and was immediately hired as a full time sushi chef at the restaurant located in the basement of the Koryo Hotel. These premises had been completely renovated and now consisted of a large reception room and a suite of private VIP rooms. The first thing that struck me was that the entire floor was lined with marble. The members of and Seongwon, the former restaurant where I worked, had been transferred there. They told me they were delighted to see me again. For the first 2 or 3 days, a slightly odd couple was constantly glued to my side. They called themselves Hoshimi. They claimed to be husband and wife and said they had just arrived from Japan. They'd never left my side for a second, and I had to confess that I found it a little annoying. In the end, I had just come back and wanted to settle in quietly and work. I had the vague feeling that they had been sent to watch me and that I was under surveillance from the very first day. I need you to leave me alone, I told them. I have to focus on starting work and settling in. The man replied with a slightly embarrassed smile. Monsieur Fujimoto, you make such delicious sushi. Truly delicious. On my second afternoon at work, I was in the middle of assembling ingredients to make a vinegared rice when a tall, imposing figure in a light gray suit suddenly appeared in front of me. It was Kim Jong il. The moment I recognized him, I almost dropped the rice cooker I was holding. Overwhelmed with joy, I rushed forward and bowed deeply. Dear respected General, it's been a long time. The General laughed heartily and patted me on both shoulders. You old rascal, what took you so long to come back? I'm sorry it took me so long. Did you bring the new ingredients and equipment I asked for? Pyongyang, the world of party cadres. And then it shows pictures here. General Committee compound, residence members. The black building on the left is the Mokran restaurant. View of the residence of Secretariat members, a map of Pyongyang, and then the General Committee compound. Then we have another conversation between them. The General Kim Jong il liked to call Kenji Fujimoto old man. Hey, old man. Dear General, the foundation is all set now. From now on, you'll be in charge of preparing sushi for me. I'm counting on you. Yes, sir. I'll give it everything I've got. He patted me on both shoulders again and left with a big smile. Until next time, see you soon. These few words were enough to make my whole body tremble with joy. See, friends, that's what I mean about some of the weirdness of Kenji Fujimoto. At times, it feels like he's honestly in love with Kim Jong il. What do y'all think? Let me know in the comments if I'm right or I'm reaching there. Maybe it's just a cultural way of talking that is unfamiliar to me as an American. But yeah, the love expressed and his whole body trembled with joy and all this stuff. It just hits me as strange, friends. What do y'all think? Okay. I immediately got back to work. The general loved sushi more than anything, so whenever he came, I always served him the freshest possible pieces. After tasting 2 or 3, he would usually say, "Delicious, it really hits the spot." One day, however, after barely touching what I had served him, he asked with a slightly annoyed look, "Hey, old man, is this the best you can do today?" I'm terribly sorry. I immediately realized how I had prepared the rice. Instead of fanning it the usual way to cool it quickly, I had let it cool naturally on the counter. The result was that the rice had become a little too soft and sticky. The general hates rice that is too soft. It has to remain slightly firm, with each grain perfectly separate, and the vinegar seasoning must be balanced. That day, I had failed on all counts. He pushed the plate away and without another word left the room. I felt terrible. It was the first and only time I ever received such a reprimand from Kim Jong il. I swore to myself that I would never again disappoint the man who had placed his trust in me. From that day on, I redoubled my efforts and devotion. See, that is so strange to me, friends. Like, he talks about this reprimand from Kim Jong il, where most of the regular North Korean citizens, a reprimand from Kim Jong il would mean straight to the re education camp that officially does not exist, labor camps, whatever. Anyway, next page. They also asked me to become their monitor. Can you keep an eye out? They offered me 80,000 yen a month for it. That's completely out of the question. I turned down both of the offers and the money. They were just ordinary cooks who earned their living honestly. Their monthly salary was only 20,000 yen. I'm not sure, friends, if that was just completely out of place in the translation. Hopefully, we find more information about that part later because that's just kind of out there on its own. So it goes to a next section after that called Stealing the Title, Black Market Deals, and Theft. It says, this is how the Pakunam phenomenon began to spread in the community around 1982 and 1983. People started calling each other comrade day and night, and the Japanese language almost disappeared. Spending 95 to 100 yen on a pack of cigarettes was considered normal. Foreigners were also allowed to buy the latest Japanese magazines. This was paradise. You could buy anything you wanted in the special shops. However, most ordinary citizens had no access to this privilege because they had to pay for everything in foreign currency. That's why black market trading and theft became widespread. There is no other country in the world where the gap between the rich and the poor is so extreme. Many Japanese cooks had their salaries increased several times, but the North Korean cook's pay remained unchanged. It was said that a Japanese cook could earn the equivalent of several 100,000 yen per month. Meanwhile, a North Korean cook only received 20,000 to 30,000 yen. The difference was glaring. The regime's policy was clear. It wanted to keep the North Koreans in a state of poverty and dependence. The authorities knew perfectly well that a poor man is easier to control. They also knew that, as long as they held the families hostage, no one would dare flee. They were right. The system of surveillance and mutual denunciation worked perfectly. If anyone dared to criticize the regime even slightly, they were immediately reported. The culprit would then disappear without a trace. For real crimes, the punishments were swift and ruthless. People were sent to political prison camps or labor camps for life. The families of the guilty person were also punished. This is how the regime maintained its iron grip on power. The education system was entirely devoted to the cult of personality. From kindergarten onwards, children were taught that Kim Il sung and Kim Jong il were gods. They learned that the two leaders were infallible and that North Korea was the most advanced country on earth. Any critical thinking was crushed from the earliest age. Censorship was total, and freedom of expression did not exist. The people lived in a permanent state of fear and submission. $1,000 or $2,000. That was not even enough to buy a single decent suit. Wages were so low that most people could barely feed themselves. One day, Kim Jong il summoned me and asked me to accompany him on a surprise inspection of the kitchens at the Koryo Hotel. We arrived unannounced without any prior notice. The head chef was trembling with fear when he saw us. Kim Jong il inspected every corner of the kitchen, checked the fridge, the storing rooms, and even the toilets. You, over there, come here. He pointed at a young female cook who was shaking like a leaf. She approached, pale as death. What model is that car parked outside? A V450, Mr. Director? Kim Jong il then turned to the head chef, North Korean, and asked him sharply, since when does a simple cook drive a Mercedes? He then ordered an immediate investigation into the origin of the vehicle. Okay, yeah, I think that former paragraph was out of order because I think the implication here is they offered Kenji Fujimoto money to monitor and report on the North Korean cooks that he supervised. Since January 1988, Kim Jong il had stopped soliciting invitations from foreign embassies. Instead, he invited diplomats to his own residences. He had more than enough space to receive them in style: grand pianos, baccarat crystals, the finest cognacs. Everything was there to impress and dazzle. In fact, Kim Jong il had become passionate about Western luxury. He had his agents in Japan buy the most expensive pianos, the latest Japanese stereo systems, and even baccarat crystal sets. He was also crazy about the latest gadgets: Sony portable video cameras, the famous Sony Handcam that had just came out. He was particularly proud of his collection of luxury cars: Mercedes, Cadillacs, Lincolns, Rolls-Royce. He had dozens of them, all imported illegally through front companies. One day while we were having dinner, he suddenly asked me, "Fujimoto, have you ever driven a Mercedes?" "No, Mr. Director, never in my life." "Then come with me tomorrow evening. I'll take you for a ride." The next day, he picked me up himself at the wheel of a brand new Mercedes. We drove around Pyongyang at full speed with the whole convoy following close behind. Okay, then on the next page, he's talking about a party at Kim Jong il's private residence. It says the labeling office had taken care to remove all brand labels from the imported products, and the bottles were kept in a locked cupboard. Kim Jong il never drank alone. When I entered the room, Kim Jong il immediately said, "Hey, you, where have you been all this time? Come sit down." The moment I sat down, he handed me a glass already filled to the brim with liquor. "Drink it in one go. No talking until you've emptied it." I obeyed. As soon as I had swallowed, a new glass was placed in my hand. On the days when he was in a particularly good mood, there were up to 200 people drinking with him at the same time. The guests came from all over the world, Suncheon, but also foreign embassies. He loved to show off his origins as a North Korean natural-born party animal who never refused to drink. After the Korean War ended in 1953, about 100,000 Koreans living in Japan were repatriated to North Korea under a program that lasted until the mid-1970s. Most came from the Suncheon region in South Jeolla province. Many of them held important positions in the regime. Kim Jong il loved to surround himself with these repatriates from Japan because they know how to party and drink. Kiku Kacharya, the next day she would phone me. I would reply that I could not contact Japan, that I had no telephone, and that anyway, I was not allowed to call abroad. She replied that she had received 20,000 yen that month as a family allowance. Very quickly, she realized something was wrong. She kept insisting she wanted to come visit me. I had to remind her firmly that her letters were opened and read by Kim Jong il's people. In one of the letters, she had put a small bottle of Japanese soy sauce. As soon as Kim Jong il's staff discovered it, they immediately confiscated the entire package. North Korean citizens are not allowed to receive gifts or parcels from abroad without prior authorizations. The inhabitants of Pyongyang, and especially the residents of the special district, are constantly watched and checked. And then he goes back to talking about Kim Jong il's cars, page 53. Kim Jong il owned several luxury cars. In North Korea, I mainly drove Mercedes-Benz or Audis belonging to the cadres of Party Office Number 6, the office in charge of Kim Jong il's personal security and daily life. These two photos on the left were taken by me secretly when I had the chance to drive them. You can see on the number plate that the car truly belongs to the party's central leadership. The number 2-16 on the plate means that the car belongs to Inspection Group Number 216, the ultra-secret unit in charge of Kim Jong il's personal protection and daily life. The number 216 itself is sacred in North Korea because it's Kim Jong il's official birth date, 16 February, although he was actually born on 16 February 1941 in the Soviet Union. He notes, in North Korea, 16 February is an official national holiday and the most important celebration of the year, even more so than the leader's birthday on 15 April. The number 216 or its variations is therefore reserved exclusively for vehicles belonging to Kim Jong il and his closest circle. The next section is titled The Uniform Personally Handed Over by Kim Jong il. This garment was a symbol of General Kim, inspired by the uniform of the National Volksarmee, the East German army that had ceased to exist. Kim Jong il loved it. In July of a certain year, Kim Kwang-hoi, his younger sister, who come to see me with several tailors. They took my measurements and a few weeks later handed me this uniform made of the finest cashmere wool. It was an honor that left me speechless. Receiving a garment directly from the general's hands was the ultimate sign of belonging to his closest circle. Friends, all I can see in my mind is Dobby going, Master gave Dobby clothes? Okay, back to the book. In North Korea, this uniform instantly identified its wearer as a member of the supreme elite. It was not only made of the finest wool, but also perfectly tailored with impeccable finishing touches. The dark gray color, almost black, gave off an impression of absolute power and authority. The jacket has a stand up collar and four patch pockets, and a row of six metal buttons. And then we have another conversation between Kim Jong il and Kenji Fujimoto. Would you like to stay with me for the next 10 years? 500,000 yen a month and all the benefits. In May 1988, just before my return to Japan on leave, while I was packing my bags, Kim Jong il called me into his office. Once you've had a good rest over there, would you come back? If that's what you want, of course. Then I'd like you to stay with me for the next 10 years. Fujimoto, would you agree to be my personal chef for the next 10 years? You would earn 500,000 yen a month, plus all the benefits. You could keep all the presents, tips, and bonuses you receive in North Korea. You would have a car at your disposal 24/7, plus 70% of the advantages that senior officials enjoy. What do you say? Since everything is settled, I want everyone to know it. Sir, I'm not refusing at all. Quite the opposite. I'm extremely honored. For a moment, I didn't know what to say, Kenji writes. Then I managed to reply, Sir, I accept with all my heart. Good, then it's settled. I'll see you in a month or two. He shook my hand warmly and added, When you get back to Japan, take your time to rest, enjoy your family, and come back in top shape. I'll be waiting for you. I returned to Japan via Osaka, and as soon as my wife and daughters saw me, they burst into tears at the airport. Like every time I came back from North Korea, I had gained weight. I was now over 90 kilograms. My wife prepared a huge feast to celebrate my return. I told her everything that had happened. When I mentioned the 500,000 yen a month and the car with the driver, she was overjoyed. That's wonderful. You absolutely have to accept. Of course, I'm going to accept. I've already accepted. She started calculating how much we could save in 10 years. She immediately began planning to open a small sushi restaurant after my contract ended. But the more the days passed, the more a terrible anguish grew inside me. I realized that once I went back, I would never see my family again for 10 long years. 10 years without seeing my daughters grow up. 10 years without being able to hug my wife. 10 years separated from the people I loved most in the world. I sank into a deep depression. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was standing on the edge of an insurmountable pit. I went straight back to the restaurant where I had left my luggage. The Kwamsangan Opera Troupe from Shangri-La, the pro-North Korean Residents Association in Japan, was performing there that evening. The troupe's leader happened to be an old acquaintance of Kim Jong-il. Without wasting a second, she offered to act as a female courier and take my message directly to Kim Jong-il. That very evening, she left for North Korea. 2 days later, she called me from Pyongyang to tell me that Kim Jong il had immediately understood my situation and had canceled the 10-year contract. He had simply said, If he can't leave his wife and daughters for 10 years, then that's how it is. Tell him not to worry and to stay quietly in Japan. These few words lifted an enormous weight from my shoulders. I felt reborn. A few months later, I received an invitation for the 60th anniversary of the founding of the Commerce Department of the pro-North Korean residents in Japan. Masamuro, the one who once introduced me to the network, came to see me again. He had been sent by the party with a very specific mission to bring me back to North Korea at all costs. The invitation was for a concert given by the Country Club, a band made up of former members of the South Korean rock band Shoko Yasuda, Sorayuki, both fervent supporters of Kim Jong-il, a singer who made Kim Jong-il cry. I was part of the Song opera troupe that was going to Japan. The plan was simple. Once in Japan, I would disappear and the troupe would turn to North Korea without me. That was the official plan. But I had learned my lesson. I knew that once I set foot in North Korea, I would never see my family again. Monsieur Fujimoto, what happened to your promise to return to North Korea? What happened to Matsumura? I explained everything to him, the 10-year contract that had been canceled, my family, my daughters who were growing up. He listened without interrupting, then finally said, Very well, I understand. But before I leave, you must give me a written declaration under oath stating that you will never reveal anything about North Korea to anyone, ever. You must swear absolute silence. I immediately wrote and signed the document he asked me for. And that was to be the last time I ever saw anyone from the North Korean regime again. I cut all ties with Pyongyang, changed my phone number, moved house, and started a new life with my family in Japan. And then he writes a letter to Kim Jong il. Here is the letter, friends. Dear respected comrade director Kim Jong il, from the bottom of my heart, I send you my most sincere apologies for failing to keep the promise I made to return to North Korea this June. I fully understand the care and trust the Republic has shown me, as well as the promise I made myself to return. I am fully aware that I have broken that promise. For all these reasons, I present my deepest apologies and solemnly swear to never reveal anything about the public to the Japanese authorities or to anyone else for the rest of my life. Please accept my most humble and sincere apologies, Kenji Fujimoto. However, friends, we know that's definitely not the end of his association because he went back to North Korea again, and then he went again whenever Kim Jong un was in power. So I'm curious to see about the next parts. We'll go out with a little palate cleanser. I hope everyone's having a good day, and I hope you enjoyed the different content here talking about North Korea. It's a fascinating thing to me. Anyway, have a good day, friends and comrades.